once fall asleep standing up while I was in the Navy. When you're in the Navy, there are times at sea when you're serving 6 hours on, 6 hours off, but that doesn't mean that on your 6 hours off that you're going to get to sleep, because you may have a fire drill, you may have a general quarters, all hands to battle stations kind of drill, you may be refueling, you may have a helicopter come in. And one time, all of those things were happening all the time during my sleep time. So I went like 2 or 3 days where I was getting 1 hour of sleep. And so myself and several other people on my watch section were literally falling asleep on their feet, which I didn't even know that was possible. But I guess if you get tired enough, you'll fall asleep under any condition. Because we all need our sleep to not only replenish our physical bodies, but also our minds, so that we can be creative and engage in creative problem solving. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is creative problem solving. And so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Rhonda gave me a great introduction there. I've written a couple books along the way through my post-military journey. A book on innovation called Stoking Your Innovation Bonfire, and a book on change called Charting Change, which also has, to go with it, a whole suite of visual and collaborative tools to help people literally get all on the same page for change. And so I love building tools. I love helping to empower others to achieve great things. And in my current role at HCL Technologies in the digital consulting practice, I work with organizations to help them with their employee experience, with their customer experience, and also at times with futurism and innovation as well. So today we're going to focus on making sure you're solving a problem we're solving. And so the first thing to start with is that we're overwhelmed with a plethora of choices in life. We have so many options for the directions that we can take, not only our lives, but also any endeavor within our business as well. And so, it's scary to make decisions, but it's very important to make decisions if you want to move forward. And having good methodologies and frameworks to help you with decision making and problem solving is very important to help you be both effective in business and also efficient as you progress through the door and into the next room. And so while, oftentimes we like to jump to solutioning really quickly and try to figure out the answer or think that we know the answer, the questions are oftentimes more important than the answer, and understanding how to frame a good question is an incredibly powerful skill that often in many of us is underdeveloped. And so it's key not to fall in love with ideas if you're in pursuit of innovation. One of the dirty little secrets in the innovation game is that there's very few instances of somebody having a great idea. Generally what people have is a great idea fragment. And one of the keys to successful innovation is to get good at collecting and connecting those idea fragments and identifying where things are weak, where your possible points of failure are, and to design experiments to either answer the unknown or to test what you think is going to be true, so that you don't invest too much too soon in the wrong idea and end up wasting a lot of money and time in the process. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to get better at mitigating risk by asking the right questions early as possible, so that we can get the answers that we need, not the solutions, but to seek answers that are building blocks towards making sure that we have the right problem, that it's a problem we're solving, and that it will lead us to a solution that somebody will actually care about. And that's oftentimes where we go wrong, is we pick a problem to solve because we think that we've found a better way to do it, but that doesn't mean that anybody's going to care. And so that's one of the key things to develop as we go through life, is to get better at identifying the difference between what's useful and what's valuable. There are dozens or hundreds of new designs for mousetraps submitted for patent to the patent office every month and you aggregate that up, and that's a lot of new mousetrap ideas every year for the patent office to sort through. But as many of us are well aware, most of us, if we have a problem, still go out and buy the simple little cheap little mousetrap that we see in our cartoons, and that is somehow very satisfying, maybe not in the most humane of ways. But it's definitely, feedback is an important part of any design. And so, we want to make sure that we're choosing the right problem before we move into solutions. So we always want to focus on problems first, and problem finding and problem selection before we start to even consider what the possible solutions that we might want to pursue are. And so, often when we think about problem solving, we think about, there's a maze to be navigated to try to get to an optimal solution. But, that's, if we get too trapped in traditional thinking, then we oftentimes miss an alternate solution. So if the goal is to go from the one opening in a maze to the other opening in the maze, you don't even necessarily have to go through the maze, right? So if we challenge the orthodoxies, if we challenge our assumptions, if we, number one, capture our assumptions, oftentimes we assume things without even realizing that we're assuming them. But by shining the light on our assumptions, then it gives us the chance to test whether those are valid assumptions, or it also gives us the opportunity of places to search for ways of overcoming what we think should be true. And so, in addition to, making sure that we're finding a problem we're solving, one of the keys to doing so is to make sure that we're framing the problem in the right way. And so, coming up with a problem statement, a well-worded problem statement, is a very important skill to practice. And so one example, when people talk about design thinking and trying to help people understand human-centered design and to understand problem framing and problem reframing, an example that's often used is the slow elevator problem. People hate standing there waiting for the elevator, and so oftentimes when we talk about an elevator being slow, it's in the context of as we look at potential solutions. It's how can we make the elevator faster? Well, we could install a new lift, we could upgrade the motor, we could improve the algorithms that try to send the elevators to the right floors or store them in the right floors to put them in the optimal positions based on usage patterns and things like that. And so those are sort of the traditional ways of going about solving the slow elevator problem. And that kind of thinking leads to super fast elevators. So recently Mitsubishi developed an elevator that goes 40 miles an hour. It's a sort of a bullet-shaped elevator that goes racing from the bottom of the building to the top. It's going to take over from the Burj Dubai elevators, which apparently go about 26 miles an hour. I've been to Dubai and I've seen the Burj Dubai, and it's an incredibly tall building. And I can't even, I didn't look up to see exactly how long it takes, but I wonder how long it takes at 26 miles an hour to go from the bottom to the top. I imagine even going that speed, it still takes a fair amount of time to get to the top. But when we talk about the slow elevator problem, it isn't, again, anchoring ourselves back to the problem and how we're framing it. It isn't, the speed of the elevator necessary that people oftentimes find themselves feeling that makes the elevator slow. Is just the experience of waiting for the elevator. And so if you try to think about reframing that situation and try to look at alternate ways of viewing that problem and how you might address that problem, then you can go in a number of different ways. One framework that you can use to help guide your conversations around other ways that you could consider framing the problem are to think about, number one, what are people thinking, what are people feeling, and what are people doing while they're going through this experience of feeling that the elevator is too slow, and go along those dimensions to try to come up with a way of reframing the problem based on either some things that they might be thinking, or some things that they might be feeling, or some things that they might be doing. If you wanted to get a little bit more complicated, if the situation necessitated it to go in a number, even more directions than just thinking, feeling, and doing, you can use something like the empathy map to, also consider potential pains and gains, what people might be seeing, what people might be saying, and what they might be hearing. So you can start engaging some of the senses in addition to just think, feel, do. One time I saw somebody using an empathy map that was focusing on what they smell, and I thought that was kind of humorous because, oftentimes in a business context at least, we're probably, hopefully not smelling very many things. But there are certain businesses where that might be important. Again, that's a good opportunity to challenge your orthodoxies of smell not necessarily being important in a business context, because there may be times where it is. Buying a new car, we talked about the new car smell, so smell in that context is a very important thing. In a restaurant context, obviously, that's going to be very important. And so if we come back and we try to reframe the slow elevator problem, move away from, doing things to make the lift go faster or improve the algorithms and those kinds of solutions, one way of reframing it would be, instead of the elevator is too slow, the wait is annoying. And so if you start problem solving through that frame, then you come up with different types of solutions. So you come up with a focus of, instead of making the elevator faster, trying to make the wait time feel shorter. And so you can do things like put up mirrors outside the elevator, because everybody likes to check their look and make sure they're, looking fine. And when we're feeling positive about ourselves and we think we do look fine, or we can tweak something to get ready for our meeting, or you can play music to distract people, or even installing a hand sanitizer, which distracts people from the thought that they're having around the wait being annoying. So those are just examples of a different direction you can take your solutioning. So by reframing a problem, you end up in a different area, a different solution space. And it might look something like this. Although this wouldn't be making the wait time shorter, this would be making the ride a little bit more fun. So if you're not familiar with the design thinking framework, you may see on the slide that it's labeled as a process. I take exception to that. Process probably comfortable for a lot of the folks that I might be speaking to today, but I like to think of the design thinking framework rather than a process, because a process suggests linearity. It suggests first you empathize, then you define, then you ideate, then you prototype, and then you test, and you don't vary. You don't diverge from that. You go from the left to the right. But if you're really engaging in human-centered design and design thinking, then it's iterative, and you can loop back at any point, because you're truly trying to listen to the humans at every phase, and you're willing to accept that you may be getting off track and may discover something as you engage in the different activities that causes you to maybe go back to empathize and validate some of what you're thinking about in terms of solution direction. Or you may want to go back and redefine the problem based on some of the work that you're doing as you get into prototyping even. And so the key is that these are some of the activities if you want to engage in human-centered design, but don't think of it as a linear process. And so you can kind of see here where frame and reframe land. You got to start with something. So you have to frame up your problem early on, and then as you do your research and talk to the humans to understand what's important to them and what the areas of opportunity are in relation to the problem, and start working to define what you're going to ideate around, then you may realize that you want to reframe the problem and potentially shift your research or do additional research. And so there's a famous quote from Charles Kettering that I always like to share when we're talking about problem solving, and that's that a problem well defined is a problem half solved. So if you get the problem definition right, you're halfway on your journey to ending up in the right destination. I like to think of creative problem solving as a double diamond approach. So diverging during a problem finding process, converging around problem prioritization, before then diverging again after you choose the problem that you're going to focus on, to really dive deep into all the different components of that problem and seeking to deeply understand the problem before converging that information capturing and illustration down into a problem summary and a research brief that you can, that's essentially your framing to drive into the beginning of a human-centered design or human-centered problem-solving process. And so, if we look at it as, 4 steps, then the first one is problem finding. And I have a series of questions that I like to use to guide problem finding. And so the first one is, what's the area to explore? So, what are we focused on? Are we focused on a particular kind of experience that a customer might be having? Are we focused on a particular, a behavior that they might be engaging in, or a particular element of a product, that may not be meeting the needs of customers? So it's really identifying the area to explore so that you can know where you're going to dive deep. Then the second question is, who are the users? Who are we? Who's involved in this area? Who are we likely going to need to speak with in order to better understand the problem? And the outcomes. What are people trying to achieve in this area? And then capture ideas and information around the tools that they're using. How are people getting the job done? How are people addressing the need that they have? And then looking at the actions and interactions in this area. So what are those common actions and interactions between people in this area? So if you're looking at a particular customer experience, like trying to get support on how to use an electronic device, how are the ways that people go about getting support? They could call on the phone, or they could log on to the website. Maybe on the website there's a chat bot, or maybe on the website there's a form to fill out to mail in. What are the different ways in this particular area that you're looking at where you have a problem that you need to solve, where there are actions and interactions between people. So it's looking at this people component. And then, within this area, what are the challenges and problems that they face? Where is the friction? Where are the areas that we are going to potentially want to drill in deeper to understand what the pain is and what the opportunities are? And then, on the flip side, what are the opportunities for improvement and innovation in this idea? So it's in this area. So we're not trying to solve the problem yet. We're looking at in this area, we're trying to identify all the different problems that we might be able to solve before we pick one. And so, there's the challenges and the friction points on one side, and then there's, in this area, here's some things that we could potentially make better, and some of those things obviously may solve problems. So it gives you the 2 ways of looking at it, the negative and the positive. Now I have built a canvas for those of you who like visual collaborative tools. I also have some other problem finding tools that I'm putting together to go with it as well, and that's in my shop on my website. And so that's problem finding. Second step that we highlighted in the double diamond approach is problem prioritization. And so as we look at problem prioritization, what we're really trying to do is find a problem worth solving. And so the 4 key characteristics of a problem worth solving are, number 1, that it's urgent, that it's unworkable, that it's unavoidable, and that it's underserved. There's 4 different ways that you can think about problems that are going to be worth solving, and maybe all 4. And that would be definitely in that upper right quadrant where it's both blatant and critical. So latent means it's hard to see. Blatant means it's a burning platform that everybody knows it's a problem. Everybody knows it's got to be fixed. As we transition over to the second axis, which is critical, that everybody knows it needs to be fixed. So you can have problems that are critical, everybody knows it has to be fixed, or aspirational, where people know it's a problem, but for whatever reason it hasn't necessarily been solved yet. Maybe it's hard to solve, maybe it's not as critical as other things. But as you're looking for, if you in the previous phase, we get to, as we're looking at problem finding, if you start, if you were to look at this as a canvas, and you start putting your sticky notes on here with the different problems that you could solve, some of them are going to land in that blatant critical quadrant. Those are going to be the ones that you're most likely to focus on. But as you look to do so, in the lower left on this slide, you'll see different things to consider in terms of your challenges in making that happen. And so, everything has inertia that has to be overcome. There's switching costs. There's, the fear of doing the new, or the risk of doing the new. And then there's ways to tilt that teeter-totter, either by focusing on reducing the pain or increasing the gain. And so these are some things to consider here as you look at both prioritization and as you look at, towards the future at making an impact on solving that problem. And then the third step is diving deep on the problem, and so there, it's really key. You're looking at what is the challenge, what are the motivations and alignment of the people around that challenge, what are the people and the politics, the outcomes, a number of different factors. You want to take this problem and understand it as deeply as possible, and in doing so, that will not only start to trigger ideas for solutioning, but also help you really validate whether or not this is truly a problem we're solving. And then, the final step is to bring it all together, to frame the problem, and to begin your human-centered problem solving, your human-centered design. And so, as we mentioned before, that's where we get into the empathy and really trying to understand the human elements of the problem. And also we can do some desk research to dive a little deeper, to understand more completely the characteristics of the problem that we're trying to solve, and then frame and reframe the problem to make sure we're taking it in the right direction, and then start to ideate. And you'll notice we don't start getting into ideas if we're following a human-centered problem-solving approach until the middle. There's things that happen before that. We don't just start jumping in and let's brainstorm and let's come up with a bunch of ideas. Really want to make sure that we understand the problem, that we understand the people that it's impacting, that we've framed the problem in the right way, so that as we start to come up with ideas, that we're going in a meaningful direction, that we're both solving a problem we're solving and that we're going in a meaningful direction. Because every problem-solving activity is, like a flashlight in the dark. And so you see this certain sort of, band of what you can see out in front of you. But if I point it over here, I'm going to find completely different things than if I point it over here. And so we want to make sure that we're pointed in the right direction, because all of the activities from the point of framing the problem forward are going to take us in a certain direction. And it's, harder to get to other places on the planet once you start going in a certain direction. And then you have your prototyping. This can be, paper prototyping, wireframing, whatever helps you get a quick and dirty read on bringing your idea beyond just a single sticky note, so that you have something to show people and get feedback on. So, software companies like Intuit are famous for jumping on trains down in California and Silicon Valley and showing people stuff and, what do you think about this? Would this be valuable to you? And so they've created a lot of their software by creating quick and dirty paper prototypes and showing them people and getting feedback early on before they start coding anything. And so, and then finally you have testing, and that's where we get to showing people and getting feedback, and then looping back around. So you build a prototype, you test it, you build another prototype and test it. And if you build your experiments well, then what you're doing is you're focusing on learning. What can we learn from running this experiment? What can we learn from running this test? And then that helps to spin you in an upward positive direction because that learning is going back, being reinvested into improving the prototypes and the quality of your solution. And it's accurate representation and matching to the stated problem. And if you do those things, then obviously you're going to kick some ass. And so that's the message and the story that I wanted to share with you today. And so I hope if you follow this approach that it will help you find a problem worth solving in the sea of problems. And just sort of always like to end before Q&A with a quote, and so this is one of the ones that I like to use. And most organizations play for the tie, but innovators manage their risk and go for the win. And so the practice of creative problem solving and human-centered problem solving is all about trying to de-risk things as early as possible and to make sure that the investments that you're making in both your time and in the bets that you're making on the problems that are worth solving are actually problems that are going to matter in the marketplace, that are going to matter to your employees if you're in an internal function that's trying to improve the employee experience, and that are going to ultimately matter for your customers, even if you're working on improving the customer experience as opposed to building new products and services. So with that, I will wrap up and see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Braden, Kelley. Okay, we have plenty of attendees on the line, and please, if you want to raise your hand or if you just want to type this into the chat. Here we go. I have the first one. It says, it appears that most of the factors you introduced to frame a problem were qualitative. How do you incorporate quantitative factors to assess a problem and compare and prioritize multiple problems?
Sure. So it all starts with the criteria that you introduce for judging what matters. So yes, everything ultimately in terms of problem solving will link back to a qualitative question. You can have quantitative answers that help to provide a solution or answer to a particular qualitative question. And so if your question is too qualitative and you need quantitative data to justify investing in answering that question versus another question, then you have to figure out what data do we have available to help us measure how painful a particular thing might be, or how much additional pleasure we might be able to deliver against a particular thing. And then measuring across potential problems that you might consider solving, then you have to look, usually the most typical way is across an effort versus impact type matrix, where you try to get some sense of how much effort it's going to take to solve that problem, and then what kind of impact it's going to have for the organization. That could be in terms of potential, cost savings, if it's that kind of problem that you're trying to solve, or a potential revenue increase, if it's that kind of impact. So if you're trying to prioritize between different products, then you're going to be looking at, how much effort, how hard is it going to be to build this product, how costly is it going to be to build this product versus how much potential revenue there might be, or how many man hours or people hours do we need to invest in solving this problem to reduce cost or improve employee experience, or whatever factor, versus the benefit of doing so. And in terms of the benefit, then you can start introducing a number of different quantitative measures, things like reduced employee churn, reduced cost to hire, So you start to have to, it all depends, it's all contextual, but there's definitely ways of, you know, comparing across, but you have to be thoughtful about how you do it.
Thank you so very much. Okay, let's go to, say you have experts in business or technical functional areas, Braden, and they have not really had a chance to harness and use these processes before. For someone new, how would you advise or guide them to start out so it's not overwhelming to them?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is to start with simple examples and to give people simple activities that lead to a quick understanding of a small piece. So for those of you who might be familiar with the business model canvas, Alex Osterwalder, the creator of the business model, or one of the creators of the business model canvas, you know, when he tries to explain the business model canvas to people, he uses the example of giving people a cow. So congratulations, you've just been given a cow. This is your business. This is your asset for your business. So how would you go about making a business around this cow? And then the business model canvas can be used to identify, you know, your key resources and your key partners and these other elements. And so think about what's a simple example for introducing people to these kinds of approaches. And so, you know, for helping, you know, bring to life the how to reframe a problem or the power of reframing a problem, that's where I brought up the slow elevator example. And so I would just say start small and build up and pick a simple example that most people can relate to wherever possible. And maybe not necessarily try to do everything all at once, but, you know, do short little bites that can help people see the power little by little.
I love it. This phased approach really helps them get these methodologies under their belt, brings value to the stakeholders, and then really helps them create that next level of depth in their own problem-solving capability. So thank you so much. I know our attendees typically like to ask a question, Braden, with regard to what is like a seminal experience that you had. So thinking back along your journey, what might have been one of the most novel problem scenario that's, you know, a company or a team or a person brought to you and asked you to help them through that? Would you be willing to share a story with us there?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you one example. So several years ago, when it looked like this thing called the internet might catch on, you know, back when 14.4 was kilobytes was a fast speed to access other people around the world. When it looked like this thing called the internet was going to catch on, the company that I was working for at the time, which was Symantec, the software company, figured that, you know, they probably want to be able to provide customer service and technical support on the internet. And so I raised my hand as the person to try to figure out how to do that. And so that meant going out and getting some books that, if you drop them from a height, could be fatal to someone, and trying to consume as much knowledge as possible, and then use these human-centered design principles, working with, you know, focus groups of new employees as a proxy for new customers, you know, people that had literally been with the company less than 3 days, to understand, you know, what was going to be most important to them, or you know, what would be valuable, consuming, you know, looking at as many different designs as possible of other early movers, some of the problems that they still had in there, their designs. So, Apple, for example, had a security hole in their solution that we did not have, even though we were using the same technology for providing the system. And so, it was just a great opportunity to use an entirely new channel for reaching customers and to design it from the customer backwards to give them as many different ways as possible to get an answer to their question, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether there was an agent there available to answer it or not, because we designed it to try and leverage every answer to serve everybody wherever possible. And so that was an incredibly exciting time. Had the opportunity to work with a lot of great people to bring that to life, including graphic designers and other talent. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy that it's how far we've come in terms of technology. Somebody was posting about new Wi-Fi coming to Southwest Airlines, and when I did the math, it represented a 300,000% increase from a 14.4 modem that you're able to get going through the air on an airplane connecting to the internet versus what you could get with a 14.4 modem. That's pretty crazy. 300,000% increase is what we've had since then for people flying through the air, let alone what people have in their house.
I love it. Talk about scale and value, Braden. That's huge. And I mean, think about what you just told us, right? The power of co-creation, the power of engaging with our stakeholders, the power of really that multifaceted look at the solutioning space as well as the problem space, the taking from parallel industries for learning and knowledge and application. I love it. So I guess perhaps a follow-on question is, as you are interacting with stakeholders, organizations, companies, where do you see that people continuously get stuck at with regard to either when they're trying to harness the methodology and toolkit, or as you're trying to move them to this new way of approach and thinking? Is there something that stands out in your mind that's kind of an aha moment or a quick tip that you can offer our attendees?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is that you don't have to fix everything all at once. You don't have to get it perfect before it's considered done and shown to people. The key thing is to think about what are the most likely, most impactful points of potential failure. What are the greatest unknowns? What are the things that must be true in order for your solution to be successful, and start designing experiments to make progress on these questions. So, if you know that the solution will fail if such and such happens, how can you test to see whether or not that's going to happen, or how can you work towards addressing that potential point of failure? Because not only will you work towards a solution that's going to not fail in that way, but as you work through doing that, you will also uncover new information that may help you solve other potential points of failure, or may uncover, it could quite frankly uncover that this just really isn't worth the problem we're solving, and you can cut your losses and move on to something else. But it may also help you identify other directions that you want to pivot in as you go along, or you may find that you thought by solving this particular problem that it was going to create, value in X, but actually it'll create even more value if you use it for Y. So you may find that you shift markets or sets of customers that you're choosing to address, because you may find that in solving that problem, and as you do some of your research, that it's actually more valuable to this entirely different group of people, and that group of people might even be bigger. And so the most important thing is to design your experiments thoughtfully, to understand where things could go wrong thoughtfully, and to always keep your eyes open and to have the humility and the understanding going in that you don't know everything, that there may be other answers, that there may be other directions to take something, and be open to that possibility.
Thank you. I love this. I think you really talked about the holistic organization and the teams and really how you could engage stakeholders across maybe internal as well as external. Braden, could you talk to us a little bit about where, organizations are quite large and we're oftentimes trying to solve, we're oftentimes trying to sell the problem so that we can get to, a favored stakeholder solution, right? So we sometimes create the problem. Where have you seen in your experience the best strategic insertion point within an organization where they really have maybe the mindset and the cultural respect for these methodologies and toolkits? What's the best from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, there's one tool that I created for my second book, Charting Change, that's called the 8 Change Mindsets, and you'll have to forgive me if I don't remember them off the top of my head right now. But you can just search for it, 8 Change Mindsets, and there's an infographic out there, and there's a number of different ways of looking at it. I think I created a flip book for LinkedIn, but the idea is that when it comes to change, people will embrace change for a number of different reasons. And as you look to build support for an innovation, which is, innovation is all about change, or a transformation, or some other kind of change, that if you consider these mindsets and if you message to those mindsets, then you can help rally support from people of that mindset. And one of the key concepts around successful change is that as you aggregate enough people to support your change, then there's a tipping point where you can get the rest of the people to come along, at least to walk in your direction. They sort of give up in their resistance. And so understanding the change mindsets and trying to think consciously about ways as you're going through your development process and you're talking about what you're working on, you can start to pull in some of these people to, help them feel that sense of mastery around the new thing rather than feeling like they want to hold on to their mastery of the old thing, as an example. But, to start to pick off a few people at a time, and if you shift them from being a strong detractor to a mild detractor, that's a win. If you shift them from being a mild detractor to a neutral, that's a win. Too often we think that we have to shift somebody from a strong detractor to a strong supporter, and that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Even if you just shift them 1 or 2 stages, then you're creating a lot of momentum. And when it comes to change, quick wins are nice, but it's not, what's most important. Momentum is the most important thing. And so building and maintaining momentum in any change activity is the key.
I love that. Yes, and I think to your point earlier that you made, Braden, right, it's really all about getting the quick wins to drive the value stronger across the organization. When our attendees might be approaching different people, let me rephrase that question. Do you feel for an organization that doesn't necessarily have a lot of depth and breadth in this area, that it's easier for an external thought leader such as yourself to come in and help guide a team or an organization through something, or are you a proponent of the internal change catalyst?
I think it depends on the situation. If you feel what my observation has been through my years of consulting is that sometimes you do reach a point where the internal people have already said something, and it's kind of comical. But sometimes the external person coming in and saying the exact same thing, suddenly the leadership will listen, even though their own people have said that, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, whatever. Sometimes just having that external validation is enough to tip someone from resistor to supporter. It's a very interesting psychological phenomenon, but sometimes that is the case. So the first question you'd have to ask is, how many times have we already said the same thing, and do we need somebody else to say it? The other thing I would say is sometimes it's not about that, and most times it's not about that. It's about bringing in external perspectives. We can all benefit from external perspectives from time to time. There's many organizations that have human-centered design practices, and still, even though they have their own practice, sometimes they'll bring in an external person or two to join their team on a project to bring that external perspective. Or they might have 8 projects and they might have 2 of them led by external people. There's a mix of doing things yourself and having others come in, and it's not. It can be because you need more resources, but it can also be to get an external perspective, and sometimes it is the saddest of all those, which is for an external person to say the same thing so that somebody will finally listen.
I think you're so correct, right, in that portfolio analysis, and that leads us into our next attendee's question, Braden, and that is, from the perspective of an enterprise level or business unit level portfolio, do you have a portfolio management model or approach you use to prioritize and select problems for further action? He says, by portfolio, he is referring to a large pool of problems from which a few of the problems are selected for further action.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good approach to take. It is a very case-by-case approach because you don't, like I can't say right now, I don't know what your problem pool looks like. If you showed me your portfolio and you showed why, what factors you used to make those selections and how you were balancing different risk profiles and different timelines and, innovation horizons, if there were innovation projects, then I could offer some comment. But it is important to take a portfolio approach with all things where you can, where you if you have enough things to do that, because some will be bigger than others, some will need more resources than others, some will have bigger potential impact and also potential bigger downside from failure. So you want to strike that balance between big and small, long and short, whatever other factors are important to your particular organization, which could be, different business units, making sure that you're addressing things across all business units, that you're not just always fixing the finance department's problems and totally ignoring human resources or something. So sometimes, especially for internal work, making sure that you're sharing the love to solve different things in different parts of the organization is also important to maintain the positive perception of your group across the organization.
That is phenomenal. Can you share with us what are the absolute best problem processes or organizations that you've worked with, and what was the value, other than the other story that you shared with us earlier? What was perhaps one that generated internal value as much as external value? And how did you go about working with them on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm working on right now is working with an organization that does customer experience work for, or actually it's employee experience in this case, work for their organization. So we're coming in as an external organization to help the internal organization. But mostly what we're doing in this particular case is to help them tell their story a little bit more effectively. And so, there's a lot of work to understand how they see the value from the mindset of their customers or the people that they're doing projects for, improvement projects. And so, it's a little different type of project to come in and help somebody with their story, but it's valuable. That's sort of one of those situations where sometimes your story so well and what you think is valuable about the work that you do. You're so close to it that sometimes it helps to have somebody else come in and listen and shape things in a slightly different way, and pull it back from your perspective and push it towards the perspective of the customer again, and so that's an interesting problem to solve, is how do we talk about the things that we're doing in a better way. But that's a fun one to solve.
Thank you. You talked about earlier, Braden, about sometimes this change and innovation process and problem solving can cause some stakeholder resistance, especially if perhaps they feel like the change is being done to them. We hear about sometimes to lessen that resistance, we want to engage them in that co-creation, that co-design, or help them really take on a role within the change effort. When you're thinking about this problem-solving methodology that you've put forth tonight, how are you typically handling that stakeholder resistance, and how are you, maybe actively managing the stakeholders to get them more involved, especially if it's something that's new to an organization or a team?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole suite of tools that I've created to go with the second book, Charting Change, and it's really all based around trying to create human-centered change. And so, the most common term that you'll hear, the most common profession that you'll hear associated with organizational change is change management. But that's not how I like to think about it. Change management is one component, and oftentimes change management is seen as subservient to project management, when it should be the other way around. The change managers should be leading the project management. But change management is just one component. There's also change leadership as well, and there's change planning, and there's change maintenance, because once you implement a change, you want to make sure it sticks. So I have another thing that's up on my website that talks about the 5 keys of successful change, and so it all begins with good change planning, and it all begins with having a cross-functional group involved in that change planning effort, and getting those voices involved early so that people are changing with you, that change is something that people are doing together rather than being done to someone. And so engaging people early, engaging them in the planning effort, and actually having a change planning effort rather than just a change management effort that comes along after a project has already been decided and after the problem has already been determined. Because, oftentimes why, 2/3 of change initiatives fail is that change management is how people think about change, and people haven't planned the change and looked at what the hurdles might be to adoption of the change up front, and what it might take to get the change adopted.
Absolutely perfect. How about one last question before we close for tonight, Braden, and that is,
Sure.
if you had to pitch an executive or in your experience pitching executives to take on a new methodology, a new process, and implement this and really try to articulate the value, what could you advise our attendees with regard to that tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the language that most executives would understand is that we can't fund everything that we may want to work on. So we want to make sure that we're funding the things that are most worth solving. And one way to do that is to make sure that we invest time up front in framing the problem effectively, identifying different ways that we could reframe the problem to make sure that we're choosing the right frame, and that we've done our problem discovery and that we're not jumping to solutioning too soon, because we want to make sure that we are de-risking our solution pursuit by carefully selecting the problems. And, you know, in the case that somebody mentioned where if we're trying to look across, you know, not just picking one, but we're looking at which ones we're going to pick, then consciously constructing a portfolio that best suits the organization and the people that they serve, whether it's employees or customers or partners. Yeah, and so I would start with some of those things.
Thank you so much. So let's give a warm round of applause to our guest speaker tonight, Mr. Braden Kelley. Make sure you're solving a problem worth solving. Thank you so much for sharing all your phenomenal information with us and for the pointers to your tools and your books and your methodologies. We've loved your discussion with us tonight, and we are so looking forward to hearing more about you and your successes throughout the year. So thank you again for everything tonight, Braden Kelley. We want to invite you to join my innovation technical community. You can find us on MyASQ. We also invite you to read more about our ASQE Insights on Excellence. Similar to what Braden Kelley was talking about is that global view. This really looks at the research that's going on with regard to digital transformation, technology, quality around the world, and really apply it to different industry segments and the focus areas that ASQ serves. We welcome you to join ASQ and ASQE if you're not a member, and we would love if you joined us on our next two webinar events on 7/21, Leading Innovation Culture Transformation with Mr. Brian Mattamore, and 8/26 at noon, Busting the Myths of Business Model Innovation with Dr. Mark Siukas. Again, thank you to our guest speaker, Braden Kelley, tonight. We hope our attendees found this of value, and we hope that we can welcome you back again in the future to hear all the great successes that you're creating around the world, Braden. Thank you, and signing off from ASQ Innovation TC tonight. Good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Amen.